Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information and facilitates a community on our forum and matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. Before we dive into this week's show, if you've never been here before, this is a quick rundown of how the show will be laid out. We'll start by covering site updates, then we'll discuss top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. Next, we will explore some trending posts on the Privacy Guides forum, and finally, we will answer viewer questions. So if you have a question for us, go ahead and leave it in a comment in the forum thread or in the YouTube chat. So, let's kick off with some site updates. It's actually been kind of a slow week at Privacy Guides because it is the holidays. And on that note, we hope that you guys all had really good holidays and spend some time with your family if you celebrate. On that note, real quick, we do want to say thank you to Snafu00M who joined early access on YouTube. Thank you so much for supporting Privacy Guides and welcome to the show. Let's see here. Yeah, so like I said, kind of a slow week, but we do actually have a pretty busy video schedule planned for next year. I'm sure a content schedule in general, but I mostly handle video, so that's kind of mostly what I know about. I mentioned this last week, but in case you guys missed it, we do have a new channel at Privacy Guides Shorts, and you guys can go sign up there and get all of our short form videos. So that way it's a little bit cleaner for people who don't prefer the shorts or something like that. And if you do prefer the shorts, go ahead and sign up and receive those there. And of course, we have a newsletter. You can sign up there. You can join on privacyguides.org and you'll get all of our news articles right in your inbox. Lots of things are coming in 2026, so you don't want to miss any of that. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Feeling very warm right now. You see, I traveled down to Florida, which is my home state, away from the snowy Boston to celebrate Christmas with my family. And so far, I couldn't be more happier. So if y'all notice a new setup here, it's literally just a laptop, microphone, webcam, and my old childhood books. So hope you enjoyed that. Um, I think Nate, I think it's time to discuss a few things we're actually going on in the article pipeline. Um, of course, as usual, we always have new news briefs coming up every week or so. So if you're really interested to see more objective reporting, as always, please check our news brief section on our website. But I actually want to give a brief hint towards something I've been running over the past few weeks. It's a product review. So if you missed those, you may remember a few that M has written before on CryptHead, for example, and I believe Mastodon as well as in a similar format. But I'm currently writing one on Hushline, which is a whistleblower platform developed by Glenn Sorrentino, a nonprofit called Science and Design. And after having used it for quite a few weeks, I'm really excited to share to you, a very honest but also a very positive review about this platform. So it's still undergoing review. We're still trying to make sure, everything's ready for public viewing. So if you're really excited, feel free to keep an eye out on the website or in your inbox to see this very long form product review coming up very soon. So stay very excited. Anyways, Nate, yes, I feel like I've been talking about it for quite some time internally, but it's finally going out, of course. Um, anyways, Nate, I feel like it's actually quite time to talk about our first holiday special. Um, unf as you may know, on the internet, there's always some form of leaked camera footage coming out. Usually, these cameras are very insecure. And what's been given for the past 10 or so years is that you can just access a public footage and just view it straight from your computer. And it's very scary, of course, but I don't really feel it's something we can really do or change about it, right? But I really want to bring more attention with this story involving Flock, which is this American-based company that's attempting to sell what it was initially traffic cameras, right? But turn into a mass surveillance apparatus featuring gunshot detectors, automatic license plate detectors, and even individual tracking across various public spaces. Flock is a very invasive company, and it appears that for quite some time we thought there was a special proprietary platform which no one can really hack or get access to. But just this past week, 404 Media released a new article uh, explaining a data breach that they had. approximately 60 or so of their AI enabled Condor cameras, which I want to remind you are individual cameras, not necessarily traffic cameras, they're now exposed to the open internet, meaning that anyone can watch them through a specific website, download 30 days worth of video archives, change settings, see their various log files, and run diagnostics on each of these cameras. This is like quite frankly a disaster for Flock, as usually like they have their own proprietary operating system called Flock OS. And to see that there's such a massive data breach means that yes, even Flock isn't immune to the most age-old common vulnerabilities that a lot of these camera systems suffer from, which is anyone can literally access them online and view it from what you may think is a secure connection, but it's not. Unlike many of Flock's cameras, which are mostly traffic oriented, these Connor cameras are pan, tilt, zoom, which are, in short, cameras designed to record and track people, not individuals. What this means is that these cameras could be set to automatically zoom into your face as you walk down a parking lot, down a public street, play on a playground, and they can actually be controlled manually to track these people. According to the various market material on their official website, um, I believe the author Ben Jordan described that many of these exposed cameras are available through Shodan, which is an open source like search engine used to find like exposed servers. I'm going to oversimplify quite a lot, but that's basically what it is for those who are not familiar with Shodan. Um, what it does is search through various Internet of Things devices, and then you can use it to identify these improperly secured IoT devices. Of course, with Flock, they've been recently trying to implement more AI features to these Condor line series of line of cameras, and since they can automatically zoom through people as they walk by, I think it's a really fascinating intersection between okay, we have insecure technology coupled with advanced AI features that we don't really know what's actually going on. It's a bit of a black box here, and since almost every detail is captured, since you can zoom into your face or zoom into a specific activity, um, I guess something that this article really reminds me of is like since it's open to the public, anyone can access it, not just the police. And so every time you see these market materials describing, oh, how it's useful for chain of custody, reports or for police to collect, evidence, you can now go on this supposed website, go through each of these 60 cameras, and stalk people as they walk through these cameras. And it's frankly quite disturbing to see, all this happen. Knowing that, yes, you can like stalk like a loved one or yourself in this experiment that this 404 media article has written about. But the fact of the matter is that, if you're really determined enough, you could definitely stalk an individual, maybe like someone you really don't like, and just through these cameras. Um, which is like something I can't really fathom like happening. But with like flock cameras being more advanced, it's actually a lot more easier nowadays. Do you think, Nate? Yeah, I agree. But I think something to also keep in mind with these like camera systems as well is like we can definitely assume that yes, like every single camera out there is insecure by definition and anyone can access them. But there's also another thing to like to critique is like, okay, what about the placement of these cameras? Why are they being placed in these playgrounds? Anyone can access them any given sort of time, you know? I think it begs the question of which knowing that this camera you're seeing right now could be potentially have hundreds of people viewing it at a given time. You just don't know about it. is honestly quite disturbing, especially not, it's being literally installed in a playground of all things. Um, I just feel like there's a bit of hypocrisy between assuming that it's okay to have a camera installed just so that one person or organization can view it, but knowing that technically 10 dozens or hundreds of people are viewing it, strangers from across the world can do it at the same time. I think that's like a lot that's also just as worrying as well.
Yeah, definitely. To be clear, I mean, this is a misconfiguration. These cameras are not supposed to be open to the public. I do want to make that clear,
Mm.
but it's that is one of the reasons that as privacy advocates we really push back against surveillance like this. Is we how do I word this? Kerry Parker from Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, he likes to say that you should treat data as radioactive waste. Like you should try to have as little of it as possible, and you don't want it in the first place. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's a just like a and I don't mean this in a bad way, like a mean way, but I don't know if it's like a lack of understanding about how technology works. But people seem to think that there is a such thing as unhackable, and we know that's not true. It's, as long as this data exists, it is at risk. And even if they did go ahead and configure these properly where they're secure now, that doesn't stop a 0 day, a different kind of misconfiguration. You never know. There's always, and so it's, yeah, I mean, these are kind of a worst case scenario, to be honest. There's up to 30 days of footage being stored on these things that were accessible, real time accessibility. Like the author who wrote this article said he was like standing at an intersection with his phone, like connected to the camera, watching himself walk around, and so were the other 404 reporters. So yeah, it's just it's Flock is so proud of trying to become this everywhere surveillance company, but they're really not factoring in the risks that they're creating. Even if we assume everybody's above board, good faith, the cops are doing everything by the book the way they're supposed to, what about bad actors? And this just proves it. Like somebody could have made a simple mistake, and here we are now.
Indeed, indeed. I think like they also the clock itself, they also rejected officially that they were hacked. I think like there's a huge like separation between okay, individual cameras are hacked compared to okay, we have our servers hacked or we have, our database hacked. It seems like Flock in a apparent LinkedIn post, the CEO claimed that all Flock systems are, up and running. There's no form of illegal access involved. Uh, no customer data was accessed. I feel like they're not even like rejecting the fact that they've been hacked. It's just like they're kind of abstracting it away from okay, these cameras are obviously very vulnerable to okay, at least like Flock customer data isn't like being hacked. So like law enforcement, you don't have to worry. Um it's just it's concerning to see there is no official response on the security of these cameras at all. Which I feel like is a very common like problem amongst every single device manufacturer, every single IoT device. No one really cares about them. The fact that you can access a camera, you can go on Shodan and search up, okay, is this random server? Can I like can I SSH into it? It's just it's frankly like it's sad to see that. All right, so many people aren't really paying attention to IoT devices, but it offers just so many like opportunities for people to like exploit in the first place. Um,
Mhm.
but I guess like I do have a question though about this, which is like since this surveillance apparatus is imperfect, there are vulnerabilities. We know people will take advantage of it, especially bad actors, and always cops. Like, why are there's like so many of these companies trying to sell these imperfect solutions to cops? Like we see Flock, we see ShotSpotter, we see honestly I don't have just two in my head right now, but I'm sure there's quite a lot of more companies. Oh wait, Palantir,
Yeah.
that's another one. Yeah. So all these companies selling imperfect solutions who don't care about the privacy of their customers, be it from like a data collection aspect or from a oh my camera's being hacked perspective. Like why are the police so interested in having these imperfect solutions in the first place?
Ooh. Well, there's a couple ways to answer that. Um, I think it's a mixed bag. I think there's some people who genuinely mean to do well, It's the same thing we talked about, like all of these age verification laws last week or the week before. Is like I think there are some politicians who mean well and want to protect the children and just don't know any better. I think there are. I think police feel like they're overworked. There's a lot going on at any given time. There's a lot of people like they're just fielding a lot of calls all the time, and I'm trying to I'm gonna be honest. There's a lot of different ways to answer that. I think unfortunately there are some bad people, like especially on the contractor side. I think there's people who just truly do not care and they just want to make money, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process. I think there's some people who kind of don't realize or they don't care until it affects them. Like, yeah, I'll throw politicians under the bus. We saw that with politicians. It wasn't until like bad things start happening to them that they're like, oh, we should pass a law that does something about all these people search websites, which I don't think they ever did. And even then, the law they proposed was specifically to protect politicians because I guess the rest of us don't need privacy or anything. But it's such a mixed bag. Like I think there are some people who genuinely mean well and just don't understand how bad this technology can be. And actually, that I will say on that note, I I always forget the name of it, but there is a what do they call it? A logical fallacy
Mm.
where you assume that everyone is just like you. So and we see this a lot when people say, "I have nothing to hide," right? It's because they don't think like a criminal, which is good because they're not criminals. They're not bad people. So they never stop to think, how could this be used against me? And it's not until it gets used against them that they're like, oh, there are bad people in the world who will do bad things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons that these kind of things exist. And yeah, I think legislation is not always the answer, but I think it's a good start to kind of like, some cities have passed laws kicking these things out, kicking like flocks specifically out of their city or passing legislation on, where it can be used, when it can be used. Maybe like the ALPRs can be used, but the data has to be deleted within 7 days, or biometrics can't be used with it. There's a lot going on.
Mm. I remember there was a previous case where I think Seattle completely banned flock cameras entirely, and some town in
A few
Oregon
cities
too.
have,
So
yeah.
yeah, quite a few cities are. I remember when I worked with the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project in New York City. They did a lot of work to like trying to like prevent the spread of flock and shot spotter in like New York City neighborhoods, and to varying degrees of success, mostly failure, unfortunately, given the
Mhm.
current city administration with is very pro NYPD surveillance, I'd say. So I think it's very intricate to see that you know right now it's just abhorrent to see like if you are a part of the police, of the law enforcement, right? Regardless of the politics that you may bring to it, regardless of any partisan politics, it's like the police will want to use every tool at their disposal to catch you, to make their jobs easier. I think that's a very human thing to do. You want to make your job
Mhm.
easier. Like, why not have all this data that can run through Palantir, through your and that is completely fed through your shot spotter gunshot detection system or your flock traffic cameras, and use that to essentially create like a surveillance assemblage of everyone in your neighborhood. Easy peasy. If they're not criminals, why would they worry about it? That is until you realize that you kind of just created a surveillance industrial complex with companies and local police relying on each other to succeed. So I feel like at this point, eventually, if like I don't know if like Flock and ShotSpotter will ever grow to a point where they're essential to police operations. But assuming if you know countries around the world will start embracing the surveillance state in day-to-day legal enforcement or law enforcement, I could definitely imagine a world where like it's impossible to detangle private corporations who are trying to like sell their advanced technologies to these law enforcement agencies who may or may not be bought out by these corporations. Maybe we haven't reached that stage yet because these are mostly startups that are trying to like get into this business. But once these startups grow larger and larger, I can see a bit of a realistic pathway in which law enforcement and surveillance is inherently tied together in this horrible like industry that we are unfortunately seeing the growth of right now.
Yeah, not to be a downer, but I think we're already a lot closer to that than I think we're closer to that than we are further from that, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Like there's always those comparisons online, like what is it? God, what is it? I don't know, but comparing like the pyramids were closer to, the dinosaurs than Cleopatra or something like that. I don't think that one's right for the record. I just want to that sounds insane. But there's comparisons like that online to kind of put history in context, and I think that's where we are. Um, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that's a common thing that I run into online is or just in general when people talk about privacy. Some people are like, oh well, I'm not really worried about and threat modeling is good for the record, but some people just have such a defeatist attitude, like, oh, I'm not going to outrun the government, right? But we're seeing a lot these days of news stories where the government is so closely entwined with private business that that's kind of where they get a lot of their information. At least it seems like. I could be wrong, but it seems like there's so many of these startups out there that sell location data and track phones, and they get the data through all these like perfectly legal, like you downloaded this app and it has ads in it, and buried in page 557 of the privacy policy, it says we're going to sell that location data collected from these ads. And then people like the NSA and the sheriff's office just come in and buy that location data from that company because now they don't need to get a warrant. So and it's so much cheaper. It's so much cheaper than sticking a van outside of somebody's house or sneaking into their house and installing malware, unless you're Berlin apparently last week. But
Mm.
it's just yeah, they're so closely entwined these days, and it's so unfortunate.
If there is like a general theme of this episode, like now I just like recently came across it, is that yes, corporate surveillance just matters just as much as government surveillance. You know, there is a reason why a lot of folks like are afraid of big tech companies. There is a reason why people want to like try to like pivot away from these services that sell that where your data itself is the product. It's there is a reasonable assumption that corporations and governments will collude together to share um, you know, your location data to one another. And I think it's like assuming that there is always a surveillance industrial complex. Well, first off, that's the wrong word. That's not assumption. It is a determination. There is a surveillance industrial complex. It's just a very informal thing that we see. We see this through the Clouds Act. We see this through various NSA programs exposing the stolen links. Where the NSA or the government can simply request certain data of foreigners through U.S. companies like Google and Apple. Um, so private public partnership is a given nowadays, especially when we worry about privacy. So I just want to keep in mind that yes, while you may not be on a government watch list, while the government won't be sending like secret little FBI agents to come after you right now, Google might already have your data, and
Mm.
all the government needs to do is ask them for your data to give it to you. Um, I think I accidentally made a segment away to the next article. Is that right, Nate?
Yeah, I was actually thinking of this next story while you were talking about that.
I did not recognize. Oh my god. Um,
That's great. Yeah. So this next story comes from the U.S. state of Pennsylvania, where a high court has ruled that police can access Google searches without a warrant. So let me scroll down to the notes here. So in its opinion, the court said that internet users making searches have no reasonable right to privacy because, quote, it is common knowledge that websites, internet-based applications, and internet service providers collect and then sell user data. So that's a little bit worrying, but we'll come back to that. The case creates legal precedent in the state of Pennsylvania, but an expert predicted that the ruling will lead more police departments to feel confident about the warrantless searches for the internet, for internet queries, excuse me. So basically, to explain how we got here, there was a sexual assault case and the police hit a dead end. So they asked Google for a list of people who had searched for the victim's address within the past week before the incident took place. The article says that Google found a hit and told police that someone at an IP address tied to the home of the defendant in the case had looked up the victim's address a few hours before the crime took place. The court noted that Google's privacy policy is explicit about the fact that it will share search histories with third parties, because we all read privacy policies. The opinion says, in the case before us, Google went beyond subtle indicators. Google expressly informed its users that one should not expect any privacy when using its services. Now, here's a little ray of hope here. The court also said that internet users have the ability to not expose their data by using different methods for finding information. And the last quote I have here is, the data trail created by using the internet is not involuntary in the same way that a trail created by carrying a cell phone is. So there's kind of a lot to unpack there. There is a little bit of good news, it seems, because the court is acknowledging that I mean, there's good and bad news, right? Because like on the one hand, the court is saying like, oh, we respect that there are things like DuckDuckGo, Start Page, Tor browser. There are these tools that are designed to protect your privacy. And I wanted to highlight that bit at the end because they're also kind of opening the door for we talked a couple weeks ago about cell phones and your privacy rights regarding cell phones, and that was kind of mainly in the context of searches. But in general, cell phones are also kind of a gray area. Some courts have ruled against geofence warrants, some haven't. I cannot recall at this moment if that has been solved at the federal level or not. I apologize, but it's nice to see them kind of opening that door potentially. But yeah, it's also really unfortunate because, like, I was kind of being snarky. Nobody reads the privacy policy, right? Like, that's a meme. Biggest lie on the internet. I have read the terms and conditions. Nobody does, and to imply that, like, oh, Google makes it so clear. And what did they say here? Uh, Google went beyond subtle indicators. When they said click here to read our privacy policy, that's like 10,000 words or something. It's probably more than that. So I don't know. I mean, to be clear, I want to make it clear because I know somebody's going to say it. Like, this is an awful case. If this person's guilty, they deserve to be punished and held accountable. Like, I'm not defending the person, but I feel like the privacy implications of this case here, and especially at the very beginning, where they say, "Oh, it's common knowledge that websites, apps, and ISPs collect and sell user data." So that almost implies like you just have no expectation of privacy on the internet, which is a really dangerous precedent to set and a really dangerous slope to go down. So, yeah.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
what do you think of
Mandatory.
that one?
Yeah, mandatory disclaimer that I am not a lawyer. I've taken
Yeah.
only 2 classes on cyber law, which is itself a very broad thing as well. But at least from like the knowledge I do remember is that yes, companies like Google, they will protect your data with the utmost like protection they can, provided that they can sell your data later. They're amazing at the cybersecurity aspect of things, horrible at the privacy aspect. So gotta remember that yes, companies, like Google, if they really want to resist, a law enforcement like request for a search, they can. And we do
Mhm.
see like, very reasonable like cases where like Apple, for example, they resisted an FBI like, request to decrypt a phone. There are very certain cases where companies will protect, your security and your privacy. However, you gotta remember that these corporations, they legally are allowed to say, you know what, we'll comply with you. Go ahead. No need to do a search warrant. Because at the end of the day, they own that specific piece of information. And whatever like they do to it is entirely up to the company itself, which is scary, honestly. It's unreasonable to assume that yes, we see like one company like who unusually is very stringent on protecting user data, and suddenly they may take a U-turn and suddenly offer that same data to someone else. And I think it varies on a case-to-case basis. But the fact of the matter is that if you truly want, your data to be like uh, more resistant towards these type of like legal requests, maybe you should not be giving your data to these corporations in the first place, or at least limit it to corporations that you at least somewhat trust. And on that note, maybe like reduce the amount of information you give to companies too. Um, I think like Nate, like you've done self-hosting like quite a lot in your like own time as well. So I'm sure like you probably are aware that yes, like owning your data is a huge like like lifesaver sometimes. Because at the end of the day, other people can mess up your data. Other people can just simply like just not make it work. Um, Especially if, for example, they give your data to the law enforcement agencies out of like a what is it, a geofence warrant or whatever. Like
Mhm.
it's ridiculous, honestly. And I think ownership of data, or at least like being aware of the data you're showing to companies, is just as important as like you know just saying okay, I will only use DuckDuckGo. Because at the end of the day, the police will have access to that data eventually through a legal search warrant, regardless of they comply with it or not. It's just some companies are more willing to comply than the others.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today. We talk a lot about there's a lot of debate in the privacy community about laws, right? And some people are just like, oh, laws are useless, they don't do anything, and they play a very nuanced role because laws are designed to discourage somebody, right? Like, yeah, a law doesn't stop me from, I don't know, stealing a PlayStation 5 next time I go to the store, right? But the threat of going to jail or, getting caught definitely stops me. Also among the fact that I just probably wouldn't sleep very well knowing I stole something. But, it's the law is designed to deter people, but it also provides um, what's the word I'm looking for? It provides recourse. That's the word. It provides recourse for when that happens. You know, when I steal the PlayStation, that I won't. If I steal the PlayStation, the company can call the cops, and the cops will come and arrest me, as opposed to the cops just being like, "Yeah, and what do you want me to do?" So, but like you were saying, the better solution is the technical solution whenever possible. Unfortunately, that's not always possible, but you know, that's one thing that I do agree with the judge on is we do have these tools that prevent our data from being logged in the first place, from being recorded in the first place, from being tied to us. And so to keep, and then of course there's data breaches and things like that. So to keep that data from getting there in the first place, being recorded, being maintained in a format where it can be accessed with or without a warrant, is always the preferable way to go whenever possible, for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
So,
I want to like point out a few things too. Like I had read through quite a lot of privacy policies, and probably in stark contrast with the vast majority of people out there, and specifically the privacy policies of companies like Proton or Mulvad,
mhm,
Signal, for example. And the best thing about their privacy policy is that it's only max 1, 2 pages, depending on the service that you use, right? A page per service, maybe. And if we read through them, you realize, oh wow, the longer the privacy policy, the worse it is, you know? And the best thing about the privacy policy of like, companies actually do care about, your privacy is that will often have a warrant canary, right? And this warrant canary or transparency report, depending on what they name it, will usually like disclose some matter of times when there is an official subpoena or law enforcement request onto their data. And you may be wondering, okay, isn't this a little scary? Like the police are literally accessing, my information through something through a company like Proton or Movad. That is until you realize the only thing they're collecting from you is just, your account number or very limited information out there. So I think it really does depend on the threat model, Do you are you at a point where you realize that any data should not be shared at all? Then perhaps you consider self-hosting, maybe. But if you're the average person who doesn't really care about the whole like rabbit hole of self-hosting and just wants to, have a reasonable expectation that the company will like preserve the data and not actively collect more information. I think just looking for a company with a reasonable and readable privacy policy is the first step in mind. If you read through Google's privacy policy, that is purposely long and confusing on purpose right now. And they hire lawyers from all these big law firms right there, paying them hundreds, millions of dollars just to have them write a complicated, absolving them of all liability. All right. So, unfortunately, we live in a society where a piece of paper dictates the rights you have with the data. That's why you should go for the company with the least amount of paper. Uh, that's all I can really like say though on comparing, contrasting these like policies for sure.
yeah, not to be pedantic, but I do actually want to point out there's a balance because
Mm,
personally, I find I've seen some companies, usually really smaller companies, that you go check their privacy policy and it literally says, "We never share your data." Period. That's
mm,
our privacy policy, and I'm like, okay, but when the cops come knocking on the door, like, and they have a legal, a warrant or a court order, like, I expect you to share data in that case, and I'll talk about why in a second. I'm sure you already
mm,
know, but and so to me, that's almost misleading. It's like, no, 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 you're
mm,
gonna share data. Tell me what you're gonna share. I'm not gonna be mad about it. I just want to know. Um, and but yeah, you're right. Like these companies like Google, they hire lawyers because they want to make it. It's it's such a paradox. They want the legalese to be so broad that it encompasses anything they want to do, but also so narrow that they can do anything they want to do. And I think the example I used one time was like, if I say I only ever drive on the road, sounds really straightforward, right? But a lot of these legal contracts will say, well, the road is defined as this and driving is defined as this. So if I say I only ever drive on the road and I'm defining a road as any well trafficked area, well, now I can drive on the sidewalk. I can drive on bike paths in the park.
mm,
Like I can drive anywhere I want because I just defined anything as a road.
mm.
So it's pretty insidious for sure. And like I said, it's so vague. It's practically almost meaningless. Like I still think they're worth trying to read and trying to understand the basics, but it's really hard and they don't make it easy. And just to circle back to what I said a minute ago is you want companies that will comply because if a company doesn't comply, they're what we generally call a bulletproof provider. And you usually see this with like hosting providers, but
Mm,
we see them with VPNs, we see them with messengers. And that means is they will not respond to any warrant, which sounds great, except that those companies usually attract criminals. And eventually the police will come breaking down their door and literally arrest them and physically take the servers. And now your service is shut down that you're depending on, and they have your data in an evidence lockup until, 10 years from now when the case gets resolved. So
mm,
it's, yeah, I just wanted to kind of let listeners know, like, there's a balance. Yeah, you're right. You don't want those overly broad, kind of like going back to what I said a minute ago. You want the service that's going to treat your data as toxic waste. And Proton and Molvad and all these companies do that. They do have some metadata, especially Proton, and that's worth being aware of and worth knowing for sure. But generally speaking, they try to know as little about you as possible, so that even like Molvad actually had this happen where the police came and showed up, and Molvad was like, "We don't have any data. Like, we'll walk you around the building and explain how everything works. And if you still want to take the server at that point, go ahead. But we're telling you there's not going to be anything on it." And ultimately, the police didn't take the server because they were like, "Yeah, you're right. We're not going to get anything here." So
mm. Yeah, indeed. I think there's definitely a balance, as you said. Of course, like having done some research on providers before, like it's so interesting to see that yes, we see like cases where companies like Telegram and actual bulletproof like hosting providers, for example, like they collect quite a lot of information, mind you, but they just simply won't give it to like the police compared to, something like, Molva, which tries to collect as little information as possible and will try to facilitate the process while complying with the law. So yes, I agree. There is definitely a balance right here. Um, something I do want to keep in mind though is that privacy policies are legally binding, mind you. So there is definitely a
mm,
reasonable chance that smaller companies who just say we do not connect any data and turns out do collect any data, well, they'll be screwed by the GDPR for sure in Europe. They're just waiting for that fine. Um, so keep in mind that privacy policies are here to protect the company as well. And if you are trying to start like like a privacy friendly business or company or whatever, try to actually think about your privacy policy and be honest with the data you're sharing. Because if you aren't honest, if you actually collect something like I don't know website traffic for your own like you know web traffic analysis program, for example, you have to like say that or else someone can report you and you get slapped with a massive fine. So keep that in mind if you are trying to set up like some sort of like website or a project or some forth, and maybe try to spin it off to like a sort of profitable venture.
yeah. And another couple of quick things that popped into mind while you were talking is, a lot of people, it, again, laws don't stop the bad thing from happening, right? So a lot of people will point out, like, well, they could be lying in their privacy policy, and now the data's out there. Even if I can sue them, one thing I try to encourage people is it will never be better than whatever the privacy policy says. So if you check a website and it says, "Oh, all we record is your IP address and we delete it after 7 days," they might be lying, very possibly. But there is not a world in which that company gets taken to court and it's like, "Oh, actually, it turns out we don't even collect that." Like, you know what I mean? There will never be a world where you check a privacy policy and it's like, "Oh, we collect your IP address, your MAC address, your ISP, your location, your this, that, the other, the kitchen sink." And then you take them to court and it's like, "Actually, we lied. We don't collect any of that data." So when you read a privacy policy and it looks really bad, it's probably really bad and you can safely avoid it. And I don't know. That's something I like to point out to people. Um, and also, I have to remind people. You mentioned Telegram. They actually were caught sharing data with police for years, and they just never owned up to it, and they still don't own up to it. I have a beef with Telegram, to be honest, over this
Mm.
whole incident. But yeah, so I don't want listeners to get a false sense of security there.
Yeah.
Telegram is
Yeah.
not
Oh, yeah, of
private in
course.
any
Yeah.
sense of the word.
Yeah, yeah, no, I didn't mean to imply that. I was just trying to say is that it's weird because like they will share data with law enforcement, especially with the Russian
Mhm.
government, right?
Oh
Occasionally,
yeah,
quite
probably.
a lot of times. Yeah, and at the same time, they also will refuse CSAM requests as well
Yeah,
and hide behind multiple shell companies to resist European arrest warrants, which is why like
true.
Telegram's founder was actually like arrested in France, right? It's because like they weren't complying with
Yeah,
the warrants, but they were very selective with it, with their. So I'm
yeah.
just trying to say though, it's like these companies will try so hard to selectively resist certain warrants for CSAM and drug trafficking, which is weird. But at the same
So
time,
weird.
you gladly share data with law enforcement, depending on your political like ideology. It's It's complicated, but
Yeah,
yeah, don't rely on those companies. Just focus on a company that tries to limit that collection in the first place, and you should be okay.
for sure. Yeah. On the note of collecting data, why
Mm.
don't you tell us about this next story from the EU and wider data retention?
Oh, great. I just want to keep in mind, folks, that this story was released last week. But unfortunately, we had such a busy week. I think that time is that we just didn't have the chance to put it in. So I think like it's a really good time to like talk about it since it will mostly take into impact or at least talked about in the first half of 2026. But essentially, you might remember the whole Chaco Show fiasco, right? It was shut down. Somewhat a few months ago. We don't really know what will happen with it. It'll probably come back in some horrible form. But essentially, what happened is that there's something called the Protect EU initiative. And this initiative, just to be clear here, is a list of things that includes a watered down version of chat control. That is expanded to a bunch of other things as well, such as mandating the wider retention of data, for example, or implementing a form of digital house arrest towards people, or even like age verification mandates towards teenagers. So there's quite a lot of the unfortunate things in there as well. But right now, we're going to focus on the data retention issue right now, um, mainly because it's something that was leaked actually just like last month in November 27 by Netzpolitik. Um, Essentially what happened was like the then Danish presidency of the EU Council is trying to propose and establish a framework for greater data retention, and this is actually something that the majority of member states agree on, which is a huge concern. Um, Essentially, with Protect EU, um, they want to ensure that existing safeguards against data is not just enough. Companies that claim to collect no data at all um, cannot be allowed to continue, of course, because this data, or rather metadata, such as traffic location or location history, is the most vital tool for law enforcement. And these 2 points of metadata is what lawmakers are really trying to aim towards, right? And what we see is that a lot of companies, not just virtual private networks or VPNs, um, these companies are not the only ones that like are being affected by this order. It includes a vast majority of companies such as messaging apps, hosting providers, file sharing services, cloud storage apps, and other services as well. So I want you to keep in mind that you should not worry about the VPN aspect of this data retention mandate, but also like any form of service they may use online as well. This impacts everything. So it's I think like right now, like the state of no log VPNs in Europe is concerning. Like I believe like we have a few companies like in our recommendations list um that I'm not sure if like they're necessarily like based in the EU, but they have servers based in the EU. For example, like Proton's based in Switzerland, Molvad is in Sweden.
Mhm.
IVPN, I can't remember which country you're based off entirely.
They're based out
Uh,
of Gibraltar, which is a
Gibraltar.
territory of the UK.
Okay, so Gibraltar is somewhat safe from that, I assume. But specifically, I'm really worried about Molvad,
Mhm.
particularly. And they're a no logs company. And if they're able to force to collect location data, they may need to like migrate out of Sweden to a more friendly jurisdiction, unfortunately. Um, but also keep in mind that since this includes companies outside of the standard VPN definition, we might also want to look at other companies as well, such as what Tutanoa, for example, which is based in Germany.
Mhm.
They're known for like basically like saying EU laws are better than Swiss laws or so whatever. Well, if this law gets passed, uh, good luck for Tuta, I guess. But then again, I want to keep in mind as well is that this is definitely like more of a 2026 like story. We don't know what specific framework is being proposed by the EU. The Danish presidency is probably expired already. I'm not sure, but there will be like a new like form of EU presidency going on forth, and we don't know if they'll be necessarily be friendly towards this specific measure. But given the fact that most member states agree on this, it's pretty clear that the Protect EU initiative will be discussed further, and there will be established framework for greater data retention in the European Union in 2026. So that's why I want everyone to keep in mind that as we enter the new year, definitely be vigilant of these potential like stories, and that if there are any grassroots initiatives that you can join, please do so. We had a successful fight with stopping chat control, of course, a massive grassroots campaign online in person in Europe. um, but of course this is probably just as disastrous as chat control in many ways. So please like continue to fight into 2026, of course, and like please let us know if you have any questions because right now, like if you had to change your email or your VPN provider because of these laws, um we really don't know what to say other than just like keep updated. And I'm sure like these companies have different contingency plans depending on what laws will pass, but this is definitely a development that we will be keeping a close eye on, of course. um Nate, do you have any like thoughts or opinions on this?
Yeah, no, you covered it really well. Especially, I wanted to highlight the whole like it's not just VPNs, it's messaging apps. Threema, I know isn't one we recommend, but I know it's one that's very popular in the privacy community. I don't think we recommend Threema. They're based out of or I guess they're Swiss, aren't they? Never mind. But there's Tuda you mentioned was the first one that came to mind for me. File sharing services, hosting providers. I personally use Hetzner, and they're a German company, so I might be subject to this with a lot of the services I host, like Mastodon and my Nextcloud instance isn't really public, but Nextcloud and anything else I may host there in the future. So yeah, this is really worrying for sure. It's a lot broader than just VPNs, which is very concerning. And I think yeah, there's we kind of keep going back to this, but in the second half of the article, they interviewed some people from like AdGuard and Surfshark and Nord, and you may not like all those companies, but they had some really good things to say. Like the AdGuard chief product officer said that this could lead to the withdrawal of VPN providers from the EU. Which, for the record, I've seen some people say like, "Oh, just pick a provider that's not in the EU." That's not how it works. Like these companies might have to start monitoring, like even if they don't keep the logs, they'll have to monitor where are you connecting from. And if you're in the EU, they'll just have to like refuse your connection and not service you. They can't give you service because they just don't want to deal with the legal hassle of it. I remember, I don't know if I'm about to make myself sound really old here. I remember when GDPR came into effect and about half of the websites, and this was before I was like really even into privacy, like half of the websites I used had to they just stopped offering service in America for the longest time, for like a year, some of them, because they were just like, oh, we haven't figured this out yet. And we don't even care right now. So we're just refusing, or sorry, maybe it was the other way around. It was, but yeah, like a lot of them would just refuse service from like the affected area because like, we didn't even want to deal with that. It's too much work. It's too difficult. And then it's only after they saw a dip in traffic, they were like, oh, okay, we'll figure it out. But, and then I think it was Nord here made, no, was it Surfshark? I don't know. One of them pointed out that that argument that if we ban these kinds of services, it's just going to drive people towards, because like I said, all the reputable ones won't deal with you at all, right? They'll filter you out. So people are just going to have to go towards the services that aren't listening to the laws, which means that they're probably not protecting your data. They probably don't have good security. They might be allowing illegal content. Like it's just so much riskier to use those services. And they're just hanging people out to dry without a good lifeline. So yeah, this kind of stuff is really worrying. And definitely, one thing I like is if you guys hear anything, please keep us updated because there's so much news coming at us every day, and we're going to do our best to stay on top of this as we go into 2026. But it's very possible it might slip below our radar for sure. So uh, if you hear something, post it in the forum and let us know.
Yeah, of course. Like we always like would cherish like any like European like or any of our like European audience members who do have different perspectives here. Of course, like I want you to know that yes, although like we're based across the world, um, Nate and I we're both American. We've very limited perspective on the current situation in Europe. And unless we're trying to inform ourselves, of course, we're both heavily reliant on like community engagement to get us the right news information um, up to date, of course. But something I also want to add as well, like as to the story, is that um, like with like all these companies, like basically rejecting like a lot of European users after the GDPR was passed, right? When I was like back in 2015, I remember there was a huge like movement where the people were saying online, "Oh, they're trying to ban memes for the GDPR," which is ridiculous. I feel like it was a weird astroturf movement by tech companies to
That
like lobby against the GDPR, like banning memes. I don't know. That's all I can really remember from that time when I was like 13. Not to make you feel too old. But I remember like there was a huge amount of complaints from European users who were locked out from these websites because these companies just simply couldn't afford to immediately comply with the GDPR, right? And something that I really want to talk about is compliance cost or the market barrier to entry. Not to like implement, economics into this conversation too much, but just keep it short. Any form of law will make it more expensive for companies to comply with. And unfortunately, due to the current state of things, these smaller privacy tech companies, Proton, Molvad, NimVPN, like all these companies
Mhm.
are smaller, unfortunately. They don't have unlimited resources. Trust me, if they did, I'm sure we have a working Proton client on Linux right now, but we don't. But I'm sure they would love to. But like this is the thing, right? Google could comply with the law. Apple can surely comply with the law, and there already are containing like this data with them, so they don't have to comply with anything at all. It's clear that this policy is targeted towards the privacy tech market. They're targeting Proton. They know that Proton exists. They know that Molvat exists, and obviously we're seeing this government retaliation against companies that actually do something to protect your data, which is sad because you may not think at first glance that these companies are like being targeted by the government, but I think there's a general argument to make to see that okay, the European Union is aware of these services. They know that privacy tech corporations exist and these companies exist, and they actually are trying to do some good in the world. But they see it from such a myopic lens, is saying, okay, um, we want to ensure that criminals who use their services are caught. That's a valid argument, sure. But at the cost of, these companies trying to comply with it, I just feel like there's so many costs that goes not only in just like getting a lawyer to help like rewrite your privacy policy, but so much technical costs and migrating your server infrastructure outside the country, blocking European Union visitors. All of that is just like frankly it's so much for smaller companies to comply with. So I don't see ironically, I don't actually see like a reason why they won't just block European visitors because at that point it's just like so much effort just to like ensure that they are included. But with all these unfriendly laws, like I won't be surprised if we see like a mass migration out of Europe entirely because complying with these laws is just incredibly expensive, especially when your entire infrastructure is geared towards not collecting data in the first place.
Yeah, I was gonna say, or it puts people in a really tough spot because, like, somebody like Proton, for example, yeah, they can afford to just migrate, which I don't know where they're gonna go at that point, but they can afford to, or again, I guess they could stay in Switzerland. I always forget Switzerland's not part of the EU. It's very confusing as a
They're part of the Schengen area, so they can move around Europe, but they're not part of the
yeah,
economic. Are they part of the economic zone? I should search this up.
I
Wow.
think they are. Iceland
Yeah.
too, I think. It's the same way that Europeans look at Americans in confusion is how I look at the EU. Like I get it, but I don't get the details every time. But anyways, my point being is like some of these bigger companies can afford to pull out, but then it's a double-edged sword because ironically, the reason they can afford it is because I'm sure they have a very big European market share. It's like here at Privacy Guides, we have a lot of non-American listeners. Like even though we're an American organization, like we're based in America, we have team members all over the world. And so it's such a double-edged sword. They're either going to have to like pull out and lose a massive number of their subscribers, or they're going to have to comply. And especially with companies like Proton, like that would be such a black spot on their record to have to give in. Uh, it's like a lose-lose situation no matter what they do. And it's just it sucks. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, I'm sure this is to some extent, I'm sure there are some people proposing this who don't understand how technology works, who think like, oh, this will make crime easier to solve. And it's like, yes, but the knock-on effects of this, I personally, one of the things I always say when they say the whole like think of the children thing is like, I am thinking of the children. What kind of world are we leaving them with? I don't want to get too far off into that thought, but it's the same argument here. Like, what kind of world are we leaving them where they have no anonymity, they have no privacy? We have to record all this data for X number of years, and It's just scary. It's going to get caught in a data breach. It's going to get abused by, an authoritarian government, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are one or two of those in the EU. I'm not even being sarcastic. I'm pretty sure there are a couple countries that would be considered authoritarian that are, or maybe it's just the EU economic zone. Again,
Flawed
confusing as an
democracies,
American, but
maybe.
that's a good way to put it. No,
Flawed
I'm thinking of some
democracies.
straight up countries that have questionable
Uh,
human rights records, but I could
yeah.
be wrong.
Mm,
I'll check myself later. But yeah, it's just it's such a I don't know. Like I said, it's just a lose-lose for everybody, and it really sucks.
mm. Yeah, like I said, y'all, like I wish we have more things to say about what this data retention framework will consist of, especially for our European audience. But frankly, like all we have is a leaked document by Netzpolitik. So just keep in mind that while we may be more on the speculatory side of things, we will update you with more substantial information once they do complete their weird impact survey study thing and do the usual bureaucratic process of making legislation. Which I hope that in their impact study they will realize it's a bad idea. But if they think it's a good idea for some reason, well, we'll be glad to share for you how this framework will actually entail, and we'll redirect you to any resources that you can definitely refer to contact your local member of European Parliament, as we usually recommend to our European viewers. We apologize that this is something that I had to think about, unfortunately, with chat control, whatnot, just happening year by year, and now protect you. Like, come on. But yeah, just like, please, like, we will keep you in mind, and we will ensure that once the time comes, you will have the resources necessary to contact your representatives in the EU Parliament, and if it does pass, ways to potentially mitigate that. But yes, I think Nate, I think it's a really good time to move to the next article, um, which is on Texas. Ooh, it's some good news
Yeehaw!
actually for once. Yeah.
It is good news. Real quick, I just want to know. I went and checked the member state of the European Union list, and yes, actually, at least one of the countries I was thinking of is in the EU. So yeah, not sure that's a country you want collecting more data. There's actually a couple of countries like that. But anyways, not going to name any names. So moving on to Texas. Yeah, so this is good news. This is good news out of Texas. We have been talking about. This is kind of crazy, actually. So we talked a couple weeks ago about how at the federal level here in the U.S. there is a push. There's like a whole package of I think it's 18 or 19. I keep seeing conflicting numbers. It's 18 or 19 bills that are ostensibly designed to protect the children. And if you guys missed it, I interviewed Taylor Lorenz and we talked all about that. Very well received interview. You guys really. You guys really liked it, watched it. Thank you so much. And if you haven't seen it, go check that out. There's more information there. One of the bills that we didn't dig into in detail, but was part of that package is the App Store. What is it? The App Store Accountability Act. And basically, it is what it says on the tin. They would require app stores to age verify all users, to download anything, to download a calculator, to download a weather app, to download anything at all. And there's a smaller version of this actually that was passed in Texas that was supposed to take effect in January, and a judge has blocked it. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean it's permanently gone, but we'll get into that. So this is a preliminary injunction on SB 2420, which is the Texas App Store Accountability Act. The judge wrote that the statute, quote, is akin to a law that would require every bookstore to verify the age of every customer at the door, and for minors, require parental consent before the child or teen could enter, and again, when they try to purchase a book. So that's what he's comparing it to. He says that, excuse me. Yeah. The judge has not yet ruled on the merits of the case, but his decision to grant the preliminary injunction means he believes its defenders are unlikely to prevail in court. So again, he's not blocking the lawsuit. The lawsuit is not over, but he is saying, no, this cannot come into effect in January until this lawsuit is finished. So the state can still appeal the ruling with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which has a history of reversing blocks on internet regulations. The Attorney General's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the ruling and its plans to appeal. So basically, they're saying we don't know if they're going to appeal, but sounds like they might have a really good shot in this appeals court. And the judge went on to say that since Texas already has a law requiring age verification for adult websites, quote, only in the vast minority of applications would SB 2420 have a constitutional application to unprotected speech not addressed by other laws. Though the judge acknowledged the importance of safeguarding kids online, he added the means to achieve that end must be consistent with the First Amendment. However, compelling the policy concerns and excuse me. However compelling the policy concerns and however widespread the agreement that issue must be addressed, the court remains bound by the rule of law. Sorry, there's a spot on my screen. I thought it was a comma. That's why I read that weird. But yeah, so this is good news, at least to start with. Again, it means like the law can't go into effect in January. We have to actually see if this will go through the court. And so now it's back in the attorney general's court, but tish. And he has to decide, like, okay, am I going to push forward with this and try to get this lawsuit through, or am I just going to go ahead and drop it? And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now. It remains to be seen. Kevin, since you have a little bit more legal background than I do, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, first off, like I want to like acknowledge that I am not a lawyer nor a policy scholar. I
Fair
am
enough.
a student studying cybersecurity and public policy at the Fletcher School, so keep that in mind. Secondly, I also want to affirm that Texas, this at least a specific like law right here in the App Store Accountability Act, is the basis and the entire inspiration of the federal version of the App Store Accountability Act. Mind you, this is Texas is just context for our non-American users here. It's our one of our largest states besides California. And a lot of the laws in like Texas and California are pretty huge. California has their own data protection, consumer data protection law. That's only applies to like Californians, same as in Texas as well, right? So we do have a precedent of larger states offering like more like stringent regulation on internet related matters, right? And with Texas's own law regulating like app stores and verification and whatnot, like we see here is like if they got blocked by a judge, there's a really good like constitutional argument that even the federal version of this law can be potentially be like challenged in court as
Mm,
well. So I want to remind you, this doesn't mean that the federal law won't happen if it does get passed in the Senate or in Congress, generally speaking. But I think it's good to pay attention to this current court case, at least in Texas, because it offers a lot of really good, um, I guess, hints of how the federal battle will come. You know, with Texas, of course, we see like they're really like establishing that that yes, we want to protect the children, of course, but what you're doing is establishing further constitutional restrictions on the right to free speech um, on a set of like platforms that don't necessarily even include adult content by default, right? There's basically no content within app stores that are related to adult content. Mind you, the only way you can really access adult content I can really imagine is through like social media platforms. But then again, that gets a question: why are you restricting the speech of such of huge social media of huge app store platforms when you can still make it targeted towards, let's say, adult websites or social media accounts, for example? So I think there's a bit of a necessity here that's Judge Pittman is trying to test here. If we're to restrict speech in any way, shape, or form, um, why do we need to like broaden it so much to app stores? And I think right here, what we see here is like a lot of big tech lobbying, specifically by Facebook slash Meta, Pinterest, and a lot of these like I would say large tech corporations. There aren't not platform providers. They want to put all the liability towards Apple and Google, right? You let them do all the verification, not different social media companies. And you might argue, okay, there's a weird big tech infighting right now going on. And that is true, there is. And as privacy advocates ourselves, there's so much confusion on like whether or not we support age verification through these app store platforms or by individual social media websites. Um, I guess like what we probably do say is, listen, age verification is bad. Let's not encourage it in the first place. And if we do encourage age verification, let's focus on device if possible. But then again, it's not necessarily ideal. But trying to like shift blame towards app stores away from individual companies or individual websites, like it's clear to me is that it's just companies lobbying politicians with their, donations and their bribes, whatever, to kind of like, okay, don't put education on me. Put it on Apple and Google, please. And Apple and Google are doing the exact same thing. It's like, please, we don't want that. We don't want to deal with this like huge legal nightmare because it is universally agreed upon by people in the tech world is that age verification brings so much liability to them. They will get sued to death the moment that there's a data breach, mind you. Like it will happen. It already happened in Discord, right? So these companies are in a unfortunate like boxing match right now, and they just begging the U.S. government or at least the state government to not be liable for these damages, which will happen. Which I think for the viewers out there, if there's anything you get out of that, is that age verification is a universally a bad idea, and these companies know it. That's why they're trying to like lobby politicians to put blame towards one side over the other.
Yeah, 100%. Just to back up what she said here in the article, it says that this current iteration of age verification, where the App Store has to do it, has gotten a boost from lobbying by Meta and other tech platforms like Snap and X. And what do all three of those have in common? They don't run any app stores. Not their problem, you know? And yeah, I mean, there's so many issues. Like again, I've covered all of these in that interview with Taylor. If you guys haven't seen it, not to keep shilling it, but it's we mentioned there. It's like it's ridiculous that it's not one of the things that often gets overlooked is it's not age verification, it's identity verification because everyone has to do it because how else do you know who's of age of not? It's the app stores don't have any way to know if you're underage without IDing you. And then once they do, they have to hold on to that ID for the next time you go and download an app. So it's just they're going to have to, right? Like most people want convenience. They're not going to want to show their ID every time they go and download an app. And it's also, I'm thinking of one of the arguments that I keep bringing up is it takes away agency from the parents to make those decisions. And for the record, I'm not a parent and I sympathize. Like I know it must be really hard to be a parent nowadays with so much technology and like I don't want to downplay that and I'm not saying like the parents have everything they need. I'm sure we could do a better job of supporting parents. But I think this takes away that agency. It goes from supporting the parents to doing the parenting. And I don't know any parents that would be happy with that personally. It's I to reminisce again. I remember when I was like 16 or 17, I wanted to buy a video game. I think it was Unreal Tournament and it's rated M. You have to be 18, right? And so I had to get my mom to come down to the game store with me back when those existed and buy the game. And I distinctly remember her being like, this is okay, right? Like this doesn't have a game. Like there's nothing in this that I would be upset about if I caught you playing this. And I'm like, I mean, it's a violent game. There's a lot of explosions, but there's no like nudity. I don't think there's any cursing. There's like, it's just, it's a violent game. It's a first person shooter. And ultimately she bought me the game, but she made that choice. She had that agency as a parent to say like, I trust you. I think this is appropriate. I think you're mature enough to handle this, and but these kind of things take away from that. It's like, no, you're not 18. You can't buy it. Come back in 2 years. So it's it just takes away that agency from parents. And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, one thing to add as well, uh, usually what this even this law does pass and App Store age verification does happen, do you think your children like will actually be having their own accounts and they'll be restricted from downloading these social media apps in the first place? No, they'll just use your account. Maybe they'll play dumb,
For
like, "Oh,
real.
mom, can you just log into your account for me, please?" And you probably would have done age verification, because obviously you probably have a social media account or whatever, and they would just use it for you, like they'll just download the apps on like, and pretend to be you. This is the case throughout history, mind you. It's just there's no difference between using your mom's credit card and using your mom's ID or use your mom's account. It's like I think very soon, policymakers will realize that, and they'll understand that. Okay, let's be more evasive here. Let's ensure that one account is one person, and it'll just be another like can of worms to open right now as they'll try to be more invasive with this solution. When the easiest thing to do is not to have age verification at all.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought of that too. How many times again, I was a pretty good kid, so this wasn't like without
Yeah,
my mom's consent. But when I was too young to have my own bank account and I wanted to like, back in the day, there was still way before Patreon, but there were still some people that had their own like membership stuff. And my mom was like, yeah, here's my credit card. It's only $5, right? Okay, here you go. Go ahead and do it. Or yeah, we've heard stories about people using screenshots from video games, or like you said, just going and getting their parents' ID and they're already being able to poke holes in this stuff. And I mean, to be fair, that's a technical problem. Those are things that can be solved over time, but it's a constant cat and mouse. And it's like, I feel like you could spend your time playing the cat and mouse and constantly like fixing it, and then people find a new way around it. Or we could spend the time just like figuring out what is the root cause here and how can we solve that? How can we give parents better tools to make informed decisions? How can we make these platforms healthier and safer for people, instead of just, yeah, I know we talk about this every time this stuff comes up,
Mhm.
but it's politicians are looking for a quick, easy answer. And, and this is not a new problem for the record. This goes back decades, but politicians get in the debates and stuff, they get up there and they say like something catchy that goes viral. And that's what they're looking for here is they want to be able to say, oh, I passed this, we talked about the Protect EU Act, and I've said this before. They always give it a name where you look bad if you voted against it. Like every politician now that has to vote against Protect EU looks so bad because they're like, oh, he didn't vote for Protect EU. And it's like, yeah, because it's a dystopian nightmare, but it's bad optics. And so that's what they're looking for is they want those good optics of like, I did something. I tried to protect the children, even though this isn't really going to protect the children. It's just a lazy
Yeah,
answer.
it is very lazy, and it's something that we have. I feel like every time we discuss like anything related to like APSA or COSA, like in this like channel, w- sometimes it is up to the parent to decide, what's good for the children. Some parents are more active on social media and they're more friendly toward it. Others really don't like it. And at the end of the day, these governments will try to parentify it for us all. But it's truly up to you to decide, okay, what do I do with this and how can I best protect my children? So, like I'm saying here, the government is so obsessed with trying to find band-aid solutions to these type of things. It's only
Mhm.
going to make things worse. And if you need like a potential example in which sometimes age verification doesn't really do anything, I want to like cite an example actually, all the way across the world in South Korea, where you know something as universal as buying a SIM card nowadays, in most like mainstream carriers requires your ID, right? Obviously, there are ways to do so without ID, but most cases, yes, you need your ID to walk into a carrier store and to get a new SIM card. Despite that process, South Korea has experienced numerous data breaches. I'm talking breaches from their one of their main like mobile carriers, South Korea Telecom. Experienced another one by Coupang, which is an e-commerce store, and when combined together, over half of the country's population has been exposed in a massive data breach, making everyone more susceptible to voice phishing, right? And online frauds and scams. And this problem is so bad that they had to invest $1.5 billion to get their three major mobile carriers to implement facial recognition every time you try to get a new SIM card. So, mind you, like this isn't because like they want to like regulate how you identify your children. It's just pure incompetency by major corporations who already enable some form of verification through your ID. Um, they need to have an additional step as well, which is facial recognition technology. I'm just going to read this article real quickly. South Korea's government on Friday announced that it will require local mobile carriers to identify identity of new customers with facial recognition scans in the hope of reducing scams. As explained in an announcement from South Korea's Ministry of Science and ICT, the nation has a problem with criminals registering mobile phone accounts and using them to run scams such as voice phishing. The nation's new policy therefore extends existing customer authentication arrangements, emphasis on extends, mind you, which sees buyers required to represent verifiable identity documents at the point of sale to add verification of a facial scan. South Korea's three main mobile providers, South Korea Telecom, LGU Plus, and Korea Telecom, each provide an app called Pass that stores digital credentials. This new scheme will see biometric info stored in the app used to verify identity. The ministry's announcement of the scheme says it hopes that a new verification requirement will make it much harder to register a phone number using only stolen data. Um, I have a lot of like thoughts right now, but I want to keep it short. That yes, technically, passes this app called Pass is a digital credential like app on your phone. So theoretically, it seems like an on-device verification, right? Which is, I guess, brings more comfort towards those living in South Korea. But I want to keep in mind as well is that it just proves that verification is never the solution to anything. Like right now, like with the concept of kids simply using your ID to pass these age verification checks online, um, it is technically fraud. Well, no, it's not technically. It is fraud, right? Legally, it is fraud, and the government will try so many times to combat fraud across the world in more established like fields such as like SIM card verification, which already requires IDs. Um, it's just they'll try to slap so many things onto it. It just doesn't make sense at this point. Like what? Like at this point, like if SIM cards themselves, when there's so much incompetence by corporations that expose customer data, and that you must require facial scans in addition to like regular ID verification, it's just honestly, like, absurd in my opinion. I just, like I think, like, well, yes, like, this may seem slightly more reasonable compared to the whole age verification mandates we see across online websites. It's just I think it's another fact is that obviously lawmakers will try and implement new policy to, address, fraud, ID fraud, but you can't really stop ID fraud at this point. Like, you just create more invasive procedures over and over again. I genuinely see a future where one day when age verification laws, will become normal. Hope not, but maybe they will. Um, Lawmakers will just simply implement more intrusive measures, such as facial recognition, in order to, um, I guess, try to hammer in a solution that doesn't really need to be passed. It's just, I think like this is more of the warning side from South Korea rather than like an inherent like inevitability of this. But if we don't stop these age verification laws, we may see something like South Korea where facial scans are required to access common websites. Maybe it's more reasonable in their circumstance in Korea to, required for SIM cards. But right now we're seeing facial recognition almost everywhere to a point where like, should we really, does it actually do anything? Do we really need it? Does it work to combat scam or fraud? I don't think so, Nate. What do you think?
I mean, first of all, I just got to say you put it beautifully. Just the irony of like, oh, we leaked all this data. The solution is to collect more data. It's just so absurd to think about, and I love the way you outline that. It's like that. What's that? There's like a kid story. I haven't heard it in years, so I'm loosely familiar with it. But I mean, we also see it play out in reality. We're like, oh, this like invasive species of flies accidentally came with us on a ship to some new country. So let's introduce their predator, these toads. Oh, now those are running crazy. So let's introduce the cats that eat the toads, and it's yeah. Anyways, um, no, and I mean, it's tough because now that we've already unleashed the invasive species, we got to do something, right? And I mentioned when we were talking about age verification that it's a cat and a mouse. They're going to introduce this, and I guarantee you that the cyber criminals are going to find some kind of way around it. Um, I don't know. I mean, I will admit I'm not enough of an expert to have a better solution, but it's just again, I can't help but note the irony of like you're in this situation because you collected too much data, and for some reason you just keep digging, collect more data. Maybe this will get us out of it. Eventually, we'll dig our way to a solution, and I can't imagine that this is the best solution for sure.
Fortunately, I don't think there is any solution. I just think that these band-aids will start piling up to a point where that we'll see more of these toads and more of these like cats like running around in our continent. It's I don't know
Right.
what to say. It's just I feel like generally speaking though, like as much as like we give a lot of credit to our policymakers, right? It just seems to me that these people just don't really know what's going on. They're trying their best here. Maybe we should add a more human lens to it. Maybe they do care. They do want to stop fraud, you know? But when you're in a situation like, in South Korea's Ministry of Culture and ICT, right? In which they probably, recognize, okay, it's not our fault that, one of our telecom providers screwed up and leaked half the country's, phone numbers into a massive data breach online, right? Maybe it's not our fault that we didn't. We're trying to fix it because, it's it's their incompetency, not ours, right? Let the government come in and save everything by requiring face ID or something.
Yeah.
It's just I think a common policy dilemma we have here is that the more the government tries to implement solutions for problems, the more it breaks, you know? And I'm not saying this is a very universal thing, mind you, right? Like, I'm just saying specifically in the realms of like technology policy,
Mhm,
sometimes when you implement like a well-meaning solution, maybe you should consider other consequences as well, such as, okay, how am I storing, my Face ID scans? Will that be leaked somehow? Or, hey, I am trying to like intercept the messages of pedophiles, by requiring scanning messages. Oh, wait, maybe I should not have that requirement on every single phone in the EU. You know, I think there's a lot of like dilemmas that policymakers face. But when you are trying to make efficient technology policy here, like and try list these arbitrary requirements, maybe focus less on reactive measures and more so on preventative measures, right? So
mhm,
maybe if you're trying to stop the problem of, you know, kids like accessing adult content, maybe like focus on the systemic issues that may like cause such an epidemic. Because for example, why aren't children being monitored by their parents, right? Like why aren't parental controls as common? And maybe like
mhm.
go into like deep research and why like this is the case, and we realize, oh wait, a lot of these problems are actually very like systemic, very societal. It's not necessarily like a technology problem. It's a way more than that oftentimes. So, like I said, I don't claim to be an expert on like these issues, but I think so many governments in the world are so reactive instead of preventative. I feel like we're just going to cause more problems for ourselves. Like we can't just solve homelessness by, you know, like snapping our fingers. We're gonna have to like solve the root of homelessness, so I think like the same like argument can be applied towards like even like basic things, just preventing kids from accessing adult content or trying to protect fraud victims from phishing. I think a lot of it has to do with like greater education initiatives or greater, more societal focused impacts rather than just okay, let's legislate away the problem. Let's mandatory ID checks right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the homelessness example is really good because I used to live in an area with a very high homeless population, and it would irritate me every time they'd be like, "Oh, they're gonna clear out encampments," which for the record, I
Mm,
understand why, but it's like, "Okay, but where are they gonna go? All of our shelters are full." Like, it's not like they're there because they wanna be, most of them, most of them, like, in my area, like, the shelters are full. There's not enough shelters. There's not enough programs to get them back up on their feet and get them back into a stable job and an actual home, and it's like you said, it's just Band-Aids. It's they're constantly adding things on, and yeah, it's or, a more tech related example. I have a lot of people come to me and they're, "Oh, I'm getting all this spam. I've got a stalker." Unfortunately, I've had people come to me with that before. I've been in this data breach. My account was hacked. What do I do? And I'm like, "Move." Like there's not much you can do at this point. You like I hate to say you should have, and like I'm not trying to victim blame, but like there's your options are a lot more limited now than if you had started a year ago, 6 months ago, and started taking the stuff more seriously and using 2FA, using a password manager. And it's yeah, and I don't know what the political equivalent of that looks like, but yeah, like you said, a lot of laws are so reactive, and it's by that point the damage is done. How are you going to fix it? So
mm. Yeah, indeed. And I think like I know I love how you cited that example of like like helping people personally, right? Like I'm sure like if you work at the New Oil, I had like similar experiences during my time with like the clinics and tech abuse, and
mhm,
oftentimes like a lot of things that I've been doing was reactive, not necessarily preventative, right? And it's sad to see like a lot of like victims out there, like they're already they're already compromised. We can
mhm,
put band-aids on a solution, right? But at the end of the day, you come out to these people like, okay, they have a lot of band-aids, but what they do need, they need a genuine help from lawyers, from social services, because that will give them on their feet a lot to think about, these relatively at least comparatively minor issues of technology issues, right? Like, oh, you have a stalker, what are you gonna do about it? Well, first off, do you have a mouth to feed? Can you pay the bills? Are you in a good state of mind to follow my instructions? I think a lot of that matters just as much. And I know we're getting quite off topic from the whole South Korea story, but I think it's still really relevant in a lot of ways. It's band-aids don't fix a problem. What does fix a problem is like oftentimes just mutual understanding and like a joint willingness to solve problems preventively rather than reactively. Um, but
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's complicated stuff. It's very nuanced, which again, they're looking for simple solutions. It's tough. Before we jump into the next thing, really quick, I want to mention Sod This All over in the YouTube chat has gifted a couple of Privacy Guides memberships. One got claimed by Eric Valium, so that's pretty cool. And then one apparently got claimed by Saw This All himself. He said, "I gifted a membership. Never seen that happen before." So I've never seen that either, but that's funny. Enjoy your not free membership, I guess, because you paid for it. It just went back to you. But thank you for thank you for supporting the channel. And you guys should get some early access to some new content in 2026. Like I said at the top, we got some more stuff rolling out in the near future.
Yeah.
But before 2026, we're going to head over to the forum next, and we're going to highlight some of the interesting discussions happening there. And even though it is the holidays, our community has been extremely active. So we're going to start off with an update from, well, this is a story we talked about a couple weeks ago, I think, about Nicholas Merrill opened, of Calyx fame, opened his own cell carrier, his own MVNO called Freely. And our director, Jonah, actually put out a video where he kind of deep dived into it a little bit more and gave some of his thoughts. Kevin, did you have an opportunity to watch this video by any chance?
Oh yeah, I had an opportunity to watch a lot of it actually, and I think what's obviously I don't understand a lot of it, and though Jonah does a pretty good job of breaking it down. But mind you, like these concepts, like at least the first half when he talks about like double blind privacy pass, right? These are
Mhm.
such complicated topics, mind you. It's like this is something that like cryptographers they like themselves study for a living. Like the only reason why even like Nick Merrill could even have I guess some variation of private double blind privacy pass implemented in like freely is that he hired another firm to do it. Mind you, it's a very complicated model. And I think like Nona did an excellent job of like delving into why that yes, double blind privacy pass is not fully implemented into like freely. You should not like rely on this white paper like being the ethos justification for everything. Um a lot of freely's issues, at least according to like him, is revolves around the authority aspect of things. Like, Nick has been like, or Mero has been involved in the price space for so long. He's a very like impressive individual, and like I personally do admire him for a lot of work he's done to stand up against the NSA and the government and surveillance, and through his work at KLX as well. Just for full disclosure, um, but at the same time, though, like Jonah has a lot of personal opinions about Freely that we at Price Guys do not necessarily like fully endorse, which is why he had his own video. But that also doesn't really prevent someone like Nate, me and Nate from like having our own opinions on Freely as well. So essentially, like Jonah went a lot into like at least how they didn't really like implement double line privacy pass like fully,
Mhm.
right? They admitted themselves that it's actually a very simplified version of it, which brings a lot into question the marketing materials of Freely. And Jonah also mentioned like a lot of things as well, such as, for example, the IMEI numbers, for example, like that will still be broadcasted to cell phone towers, and that will still be collected towards like these cell phone tower dumps, right? So like at the end of the day, like I think like his deep dive into his video, like I personally highly recommend it. You don't have to like consider it an official opinion by privacy guides, but keep in mind that I'm sure Jonah can do a much better job explaining it than I can personally, as someone whose background isn't really into like this sort of like cellular networks type of field. But yeah, but Nate, do you have anything to add about Freely?
No, I do appreciate Jonah had a really nuanced take. There's a one of the podcasts I listen to. The host sometimes says, "The internet is where nuance goes to die,"
Mm,
because it's just I don't know. Something about the internet is we're not always good at holding two conflicting ideas that are true. And for example, you mentioned like, and I agree with you. I really respect Nick Merrill and what he's done and what he's been through. And I personally, I'll be honest, I like Calyx, the OS, but Jonah makes a lot of really good arguments where there's a lot of objective hardening things that Calyx could do that they choose not to for a variety of reasons. And he also makes the point, or really the more relevant point here is like, just because somebody did something really great in the past doesn't necessarily mean that they're right all the time. And I'm actually thinking of another very famous privacy figure when I say that. There's, it doesn't take away from any of his previous work or what he's done. It just means that he's not always right about everything. And it's I don't know. It's one of those things where, and I think we said this before. Like, I really want to like Freely. I want to like what Nick is up to these days. But I do agree with Jonah, especially just in the sense of even putting aside like the whole double armadillo thing isn't fully implemented and all that. Like, it applies only to the payment. And man, I've harped on this so much, but like just this week, just this week, I went into a Target and I found a stack of hold on, I literally have it here.
Oh my god.
I found a
Mint
stack of
Mobile.
Mint Mobile 1 week trial cards, and they had like usually they sell it in like a 3 month starter pack. And when you sign up for Mint Mobile, you do have to pay a year in advance, but it's like $15 for it breaks down to $15 a month. It's like $200 a year. And it, I'm not trying to show Mint Mobile for the record. They're the ones that I know this works on. They did not verify. I used that thing. I signed up last night. They did not verify my name. I picked a phone number from New York, I think, maybe Los Angeles. I usually pick one of those two. Um, they in the past I've been able to pay with privacy cards, and it just it's like it's a pretty much private experience. The only thing Freely does is they really deliver the SIM card to your door and they don't retain the data, which is great. Like, it's great for accessibility and stuff, but it doesn't address the IMEI tracking. Like you were saying, it doesn't address the location tracking. If you're not using a VPN or you're not using like Signal, it doesn't address the network, the traffic on the network. Like, it's just, yeah, it's really unfortunate because I want to like what he's doing, but I'm with Jonah. I'm kind of struggling to see a niche for it. So,
Mm. Yeah,
or maybe
and
not a niche, but what I'm
yeah,
trying to
I
say.
like also like just because like we criticize a lot, it doesn't mean like it's we're recommending it that you don't use it. If you have the money and you live in a certain in a location where like you can't really easily access Mint Mobile or any other
Mhm.
provider, like for example, in person with cash or with a privacy card, as you mentioned, um, just like you can always like rely on Freely if you want, if you need it delivered, for example. It's not a
Mhm.
bad service. I'm sure it does the job very well, which is like retain as little as your customer information as possible. Just keep in mind that when you get companies with these type of marketing, keep in mind there's so many other data you're actually broadcasting that isn't just customer information or payment information. It's also your IMEI number, whatever information you're showing on your phone, and that can easily be like targeted in a cell phone dump, quote unquote, by law enforcement if that is your threat model. So just make sure to have a realistic view of your current situation, and keep in mind that these burner like SIM cards aren't the best solution out here for you. If you're aware that these type of like attacks exist, just keep that in mind. And like at the end of the day, if you just need a burner like SIM card, something as simple and cheap as Mint Mobile or something expensive as Freely can still work out for you. It's not the end of the world if you get Freely. But just like keep in mind as well is that you don't need Freely to have an anonymous number. But yeah, Nate, I think
Yeah.
it's a good time to move on to like, do you want to go discuss the next like potential like trending topic on the forum? I want to go through questions.
Yeah. No, we'll go ahead and bring this up really quick because we could actually probably use some feedback from the community on this one. So
Mm,
in the last couple of weeks, there have been some calls on the forum regarding our VPN recommendations because one of our criteria to recommend a VPN is that it has to have a kill switch in the client. So when you download Proton VPN, Mullvad, iVPN, you have to be able to enable a kill switch, which for those who don't know is exactly what it sounds like. If basically it's designed so that if the VPN loses connectivity for whatever reason, then it stops all traffic, and that way you're not accidentally leaking unprotected traffic without realizing it. So um, there's been a lot of debate because iOS, and this is a kind of a known issue that's been a known issue for a while. VPNs on iOS are not always super effective, and that is because of Apple. And again, this is an issue Apple knows about and has refused to fix. Somebody feel free to correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but this is how I remember this story. And Apple, basically on iOS, it's really hard, if not impossible, to ensure that all traffic actually goes through the VPN. And so as a result, some people have said we should remove Proton from a recommendation because of this. And there's been a lot of debate about, well, that's not really Proton's fault. That's like an Apple architecture thing. Uh, recently somebody opened a post that made a really good point where IVPN actually removed the kill switch from iOS in 2023, which I did not realize. So it's very, yeah, it's we're kind of I did raise this to the team this morning because we had the last couple days off because Christmas and Christmas Eve. So this was my first time seeing like, oh, there's another post, and now I think there's actually like two different posts about, hey, how should we address this? Like, how should privacy guides address this? And people are recommending like, well, you should change the criteria. You should split up into these different. There's a few different ideas going around. So yeah, I think this is something that we are going to address as a team and try to figure out what the best path forward is. Just keep in mind that, like I said, it is the holidays. I actually, I was going to say this at the end, but I do want to shout out Jordan is producing right now. If you're watching this and you're seeing like the article and right now the chat's in the middle of the screen and Kevin and I are on opposite sides, like Jordan came in on their time off to go ahead and produce this. And we really appreciate them doing that because they totally didn't have to. They're taking time off right now, and a couple other team members are taking time off. So it may take us a little bit while before everybody comes like quote unquote back into the office and we can actually like hash this out and discuss what the best course of action is. But in the meantime, I think if you guys have any opinions, I for sure would be open to hear them because there may be something that we're not thinking of. But uh, did I sum that up pretty well? Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
that one, Kevin?
excellent summary. I won't say too much, but I'll have to keep note is that we have, I think, around 5 different discussion threads related to this topic. I think it started with pro someone wanting to remove Proton VPN, and
I think I
then
saw that one. Yeah.
one about iVPN as well. And then there's
Mhm.
3 different like discussion posts about very similar but also very different proposals, right? I
Oh
think
my God,
one
are there
about
three
like
now? There were two last time I
oh
checked.
oh god, yeah. I think change proposal on privacy guides recommended VPN providers, mention kill switch leaks by
Mhm.
OS limitations. Is there another one?
Okay.
I
There
may
might be
miss
another
another
one.
one. I don't know. Maybe there is, but it isn't. But like keep in mind though, like I feel like I won't be surprised if there's another like proposal saying we should just don't recommend Apple devices because of this. But again, there's also another
Actually,
limitation
somebody
with
just
like
posted that in
Proton.
the chat.
Wait, really? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Resplendent
I guess.
606 said maybe we should just recommend against Apple. That is a huge security flaw. Not to get too deep into the weeds. I would argue Apple's security is pretty good. Um, I don't know. It's we don't actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but real quick, we don't actually
Yeah.
recommend Apple devices on the website. We only recommend Pixels, preferably with graphene. We do offer advice for Apple users because we recognize that they have such a large user base, but we don't officially technically recommend it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Like what Nate said essentially, like we can acknowledge that Apple devices are incredibly secure if you are trying to avoid malware. Um,
mhm.
but of course, like officially recommend something like Cubes OS or Tails if you're trying to avoid that type of things. Because Apple devices do have verified boot.
Unix,
Apple
yeah.
devices, um, Apple devices are quite good, at least for the average user in terms of security. Which is ironic because Linux devices aren't even that secure without massive configuration, right? Or having a dedicated operating system, that is geared towards security. So I actually like want to like emphasize that the kill switch feature on VPN seems to more so impact I say folks who are sailing the high seas, for example, and you're seeding a specific corn file. If you do, for example, have a faulty kill switch that could leak data, yeah, that could result in you have in a lot of trouble for you, right? But for most people, like leaks aren't I wouldn't say they aren't that concerning, but it may not necessarily fit your threat model if you use the Apple device. Because frankly, we don't really recommend Apple devices if we're trying to avoid this type of issues. If you do use the Apple device, I think you probably recognize that yes, I am accepting like the faulty implementations of a VPNs. Generally speaking, I'm not gonna rely on a kill switch, and I think that's simply like something that we should probably like recommend here, for sure. Um, but yeah, like I think like I'm not gonna like speak on behalf of the team. Obviously, it's just my personal opinion, but I feel like we might be geared more towards adjusting the guidelines to be more inclusive of people on Apple devices rather than just having a strict blanket requirement for the kill switch to function on all like 3 major, operating systems. But that's what I'm personally predicting here. But then again, we need to discuss this definitely after the holiday break in order to have a firm opinion. So Thank you all for having that amazing conversation in the forum. I'll continue to have a deeper look on every single response and discussion y'all had, and I'll try to like get something up for the team so we can they do make a final decision for everyone.
Yeah, I think I did find that third thread you were talking about. So yeah, this is a very heated issue that people are very passionate about, which sometimes that's good. Sometimes you get some really good insight and good ideas from people who care so much. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for being like active. Like, trust me, it's not a bad idea that like y'all are talking about it. It's like we're really happy to see that y'all really care about this, and we'll make sure to implement this feedback accordingly in our recommendations. But
All right. You thinking it's time for some questions?
of course, of course. I was wondering if do we have any specific questions by members though, either like on the forum or in the chat?
Let's see. Okay, I don't see any in the forum. Let me go back and
This-
scroll through the chat here real quick. Uh, let's see. We have some comments on Flock. YouTube 09T says first time managing to catch live. Love your work. Thank you so much for watching with us. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading through these. Belated congrats to Nate on joining the team. Thank you so much. Kevin, you're sounding so much better with the current hardware. So good job on the mic. Um, Somebody said great interview with Taylor. Sorry, y'all. I'm catching up on these things. Try to keep. Yeah. Oh, Jordan said I see the new privacy guides poster in the background. Yeah, this is. I'll grab that real quick. Actually. Um,
Shout out
Actually, never
M.
mind. It's kind of on there pretty good. But yeah, M designed that and it looks amazing, and I'm super happy with it. I actually do need to make some shorts showing the showing some of the new merch and showcasing that a little bit better for you guys. I think I'm almost caught up here. Resplendent, when we were talking about Freely, Resplendent 606 said I would switch to Cape, which is supposed to be very privacy respecting, but $100 a month per line. Yeah, I'm with you. Cape, I don't know if they have their own in-house device that they sell, and I hear that it's not publicly available, and I don't know if this is exclusive to that device or if it's a general service they offer, but it's supposed to rotate some of your hardware identifiers wherever it's legal, like the IMEI, for example, or maybe it's IMSI. I always get those mixed up. I apologize. But that's, actual, like, some better protection from some of the concerns that we talked about. But yeah, $100 a month is insane. It, I mean, I don't mean that in a rude way. Like, I'm sure they've got to pay the bills, but that I can't afford that for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, and also keep in
Um,
mind that this is not an endorsement of Cape. We don't officially recommend that company for the record, just for the sake of like for
yeah,
disclaimer
thank you.
purposes. Yeah.
But yeah, I did not
Um,
see any questions in the live chat. So we can head
yeah.
over to the forum. The first one comes from Seven. You said, question for the staff this week. Would love to know your 2026 privacy goals and tech resolutions if you have any. Are you embracing more digital minimalism, tightening up or enhancing your threat model in line with how bad some things are becoming, moving to desktop Linux full time, something else? Do you have any New Year's resolutions, Kevin, regarding your
Oh, I have
privacy and
not
tech?
think of any. I don't have any. I don't feel like I don't have any. That's the thing is like I feel like you think of resolutions the day of, like the existential dread of watching the fireworks come up, and I think, okay, damn, I need to go to the gym again. But I feel like that's the number one resolution everyone has, like taking care of your body, doing something
Yeah.
new. But in terms of privacy and tech, oh, I don't know. Like, I guess something that I've always wanted to do personally, at least for my professional like career, is to get more into like self-hosting, creating a home lab
Mm.
and just like using it for various cybersecurity related projects because I'm taking a lot more technical courses next semester. And I think it will be generally really good to know about something as simple as self-hosting and like using my Raspberry Pi more relevant projects. So not necessarily like a privacy related resolution, more so like a tech related one. But hey, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll create like an amazing website about this whole journey, and maybe I'll document it. That's another thing I
Mm.
also want to do as well, creating a website and maybe a little blog of some sorts. Um, but yeah, I guess that's what I have personally. I'd say like I've already on desktop Linux for the most part. I recently got like a phone with Graphene OS on it, and so far I loved it. It's been a while since I've been on like Android as a former Apple user, so it's been honestly like a relief, honestly. Um, So yeah, like I say, I accomplished a lot of my resolutions this year. Not necessarily next year. Next year, I gotta think about that. But what about you, Nate?
Yeah, I don't have any specific like privacy. So to be honest, most of my resolutions have to do with content creation, both here and the new oil. I mentioned that we've got some pretty big plans for 2026 and a very ambitious schedule that we're going to try to hit. And I think we can do it. It's going to be a team effort for sure. And so, a lot of it is like just trying to like pull my end of the what am I even trying? I'm trying to mix two metaphors. Trying to pull my weight and keep up my end of the bargain where, I'm putting out the content on time up to the quality that it should be. And, same thing over at the new oil. I'm just trying to put out blog posts regularly and hopefully videos regularly. I know every year I say I need to use cash more. um, so maybe, hopefully, that'll be part of it. But yeah, a lot of my resolutions have to do with completely unrelated things, just like financial goals and fitness goals and things that aren't really related to privacy per se. But actually, maybe there's some of these. I'm going to be totally honest with you. Some of these books up here behind me, I have not read in full, and I think that's something I want to do is get back into reading and finish some of those books. So yeah. All right. Next up, this isn't really a question, but important clarification. BSS said in regard to the headline story that Google did, or excuse me, the police did have a warrant. And they said it was not specific to the defendant's data, but a warrant for a large swath of data. And he quotes the ruling. In a subsequent investigation of the crimes, the Pennsylvania State Police obtained a search warrant for a substantial quantity of Google's records and thoroughly examined them. The records revealed the defendant's Google address, or excuse me, Google search for the victim's address. So,
Ah,
um,
clickbait.
no, actually, I'm gonna. I mean, okay, yes, maybe. All right, I'll allow that. But I'm gonna sit here and say, like you said, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, this almost feels like if I was a lawyer, I should run this past my lawyer friend to see if this argument stands up to scrutiny. I would argue that that alone is reason to get this thrown out because all of this stuff is based on the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment, right? Like, do you have it? Oh, okay, man, I'm gonna dig in now. Okay,
Oh,
so the expectation of privacy comes from an old court case. I should go find this. It's somewhere in one of my old blog posts. Um, there was an old case from I want to say like the 1950s or no 70s. It was from a time where phone booths were a thing. And the reason that there's an expectation of privacy is because there was this dude who was doing illegal gambling and he would go to the phone booth every day at like the certain time or whatever. He would go to the phone booth, call his bookie in another place where the gambling was legal and place the bet. I'm going off memory here, so I might get some of the finer details wrong. But basically, he was like doing something. The police wiretapped the phone booth and got his phone calls, and that's how they convicted him. But he made the argument that he had an expectation of privacy because when you step into the phone booth and shut the door, and I'm going to be sarcastic here. For those who don't remember, phone booths used to be an actual thing where there was a phone before cell phones. There was a physical phone installed in a little room, and you would step inside and you would shut the door and you'd put in a quarter and you'd make your phone call, or you'd call collect and make them pay for it. Anyways, he made the argument that once he stepped inside and shut the door, he had an expectation of privacy, and therefore they needed to go get a warrant to tap the phone, which I don't think they did. So search warrants are supposed to be extremely specific. This is one of the few things I'm very confident about, actually. When you fill out a search warrant, you are supposed to say exactly what you are searching for. And not this is the way it was explained to me. If you're searching a house for a stolen elephant, you can't search in the sock drawer because why would there be an elephant in the sock drawer? So for I feel like for them to just say we want all of Google's records for this time and relating to this thing, I feel like I would argue that is so broad because that's almost like saying we want access to every house on this block and here's what we're looking for. It's like, but you can't just indiscriminately check every house. That's not how warrants work IRL, and I would argue that's not how they should work in the digital world. But I don't know, maybe I'm splitting hairs on that one.
yeah. Like I think if I'm going to be like, like playing devil's advocate, oh, I'm a lawyer on the government side, right? I'll probably argue something like, oh, this
Objection.
specific warrant objection this warrant was actually directed towards Google, and Google has that data, and maybe they were very specific with the data they collected. But then again, it's kind of like the same though. It's like people don't realize that your data. You don't own your data. You know, it's like maybe if that data was hosted in your house, maybe, but if it's by Google, then it's entirely this warrant was directed towards Google, right? So I think like in terms of like ensuring that there is sufficient minimization of the specific data or like the premises like searched or collected, um, is this like story like accurate or not? Like at least according to the headline, I don't know. Like I think like because the warrant was directed towards Google, maybe like it is a good argument saying that yes, they had a warrant to discuss it. It's just that didn't intend on that data being like like targeted like towards that specific individual, right? So I think that's a really clear distinction to keep in mind as well. Uh, like I said, we're both of us are not lawyers. We don't really know like the
Yeah.
specifics behind it, of course. Uh, but yeah, like thank you for pointing it out though. Like seriously, like I think it's good to know, like, yes, like there wasn't a warrant directed towards, like this specific individual in mind, but companies, of course, are subject to such warrants and they can get your data without a warrant. So I guess it depends on your interpretation of the headline. Like without a warrant, like what does it mean? Without a warrant on you or without a warrant on the company itself? So, like I said, there's a lot of stories with bad headlines out there. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, that does. I'm gonna have to go back and reread that story now and see how it was worded. Because yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Well, again,
awkwardly
I guess
worded.
it goes back to the
Yeah.
expectation of privacy. Well,
Hmm.
I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's complicated for sure. It's like I think more maybe
Mhm.
like if we do like, analyze this from like your perspective, maybe not in this specific case, but also maybe like in the general argument in which your data there must be better informed consent, because you
Mhm.
have reasonable expectation to assume that your data will be kept protected from these searches. Or maybe like just simply by clicking on yes to terms and service by using a Google search doesn't necessarily mean informed consent, right? So maybe just a general argument
Right.
towards that, I think, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of my thought too. Is like I said when we were talking about it. How many people just click through? I have read the terms and conditions. No, they haven't. They don't know what's in there, but somehow that's supposed to count, and it's ridiculous. There's a it's been a couple years since I watched it, but last time I watched it, it held up really well. There's a documentary from 2014 called Terms and Conditions May Apply. And they did the math. And I mean, lots of people have done this math, but it's like, if you just look at, like, what is it? Google's terms and conditions for all of their products, it's like longer than the Harry Potter books. And it would take you like a whole month of nonstop reading to read them all. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And actually, I feel like, yeah, they should appeal on that grounds alone. The judge, oh, is very clearly in the terms and conditions. It's ridiculous to expect anybody to read that stuff. And like you were saying, they do that on purpose. It's insane. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Privacy policies, man. I'm telling you.
So bad. Somebody, I don't know that's another thing where I don't know what the solution is, but we got to do something about those. Those are so bad.
Mm.
Okay. Our next question comes from Tropics. He says, I've been reading Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. He mentions how companies like Meta will spend billions of dollars trying to keep people as long as possible on their platforms. Makes me wonder, how do these companies make money off keeping people as long as possible? For instance, if I were to use Facebook with uBlock Origin and a privacy respecting web browser, how can they make money off me? The answer is you are the outlier. Most people using Facebook are not using it with uBlock Origin in a privacy respecting browser. In fact, I'm willing to bet most of them are using the app. And good Lord, I've covered so many stories over the years about Facebook doing incredibly sketchy and not okay things with it, like genuinely not okay, like finding workarounds to break out of the app to track you even more in violation of Apple and Google's terms of service of how apps are supposed to function. So, um, yeah, I mean, that's really how companies pay Facebook money. You To kind of read the rest of it real quick. You say, I assume the primary way they make money is by constantly spying on users and selling their data to data brokers and advertisers. A lot of the time in the privacy community, we say that a company is selling your data, and that's really an oversimplification because Google and Facebook and all these other companies that make their money off advertising are not actually selling your data. they're selling access to your data. So Facebook knows theoretically how old I am and what my interests are and all that stuff. Why would they give that data up? I mean, they might give it up to like, they might give some of it up to like LexisNexis and some of these like bigger companies that make marketing profiles, but they're not going to give it up to like Nike and Apple and the companies trying to do their advertising. Instead, they're going to say, you give me money and I will show your ad to the people who would be interested in it. So that's how they make money is they spy on their users, they collect the data, they make a profile about you, which Signal has a really good blog post from a couple years ago about they tried to buy ads on Instagram that were like hyper targeted. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. And then yeah, so they collect this data. Companies will pay them and say, we're trying to reach new audiences. And I, way back in the day, actually, before I was into privacy, I bought a few Facebook ads. So I have a general idea of how the process works. You can pick like the pages your people would be into, the interests they would be into. You can pick demographics. Like I want just men between 25 and 34 or whatever, 24, 35, whatever the, you can pick a very specific demographic and it will go and show those ads to people. And that's how they make their money. And that's why you mentioned, it's designed to keep you on the platform as long as possible, because the more you're on the platform, the more ads you see, the more they can charge those people, because it's like, oh, look, we put your ad in front of 200 million people. Only 600 of them clicked on it, but that doesn't matter. So yeah. And then real quick, I did find the Signal post. It says the Instagram ads Facebook won't show you. And here's just a couple of them. You got this ad because you're a newlywed Pilates instructor and you're cartoon crazy. This ad used your location to see you're in La Jolla. You're into parenting blogs and thinking about LGBTQ adoption. You got this ad because you're a K-pop loving chemical engineer. This ad used your location to see you're in Berlin and you have a new baby and you just moved and you're really feeling those pregnancy exercises lately. I'll just stop there. But yeah, there's several of them. You guys should go read these. There's about 9 of them or so, and they are really, really personal. And Signal goes on to make the argument that Facebook wouldn't show these ads because they didn't want people to know how creepy it is. So yeah.
Ooh, love Facebook, mind you. And I also want to add to like Nate's excellent point right here. The thing with Facebook is that they also thrive off engagement. All right, even if you're using Facebook with uBlock Origin and Brave or Firefox, whatever, the fact that you're on the platform, bringing up their total number of users up, engaging on it, consuming content, liking posts, commenting on posts, talking to your friends and family members, colleagues, that by itself keeps people in. Because at the end of the day, a network requires people to be in the network. And unfortunately, the network effect is so strong is that sometimes even if you try to take steps itself to protect your own privacy, you are inadvertently keeping other people in your network into Facebook, right? That's the important part. Facebook is deathly afraid of dying. Like they're afraid of being that old platform like MySpace where only old people use it. So try and diversify as much as possible, also keeping the current, um, you know, age demographic into Facebook. So I think the younger generation is so focused on Facebook Marketplace, right? And that's the reason why I love people from Gen Z at least are still on Facebook. Um,
Mhm.
Facebook groups are very common too, like especially around like millennials and Gen X, and so I think that's what keeping a lot of people on Facebook as well, right? So all these like different niche features is just Facebook trying to darn the hardest to keep you in, or else they'll die out one day, just like MySpace. And yeah, I guess that's definitely more of an existential threat thing to Facebook rather than like just a strategy. I don't think they care so much about ad blockers. They just care that you use the platform, because the vast majority of people will not use ad block. The vast majority of people will just use the app and get served ads. And that's how they make their money. So keep that in mind as well when you use it. Maybe try not to use it in the future, even though you haven't used it in quite some time.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny. The network effect is one of those weird things that like I don't understand. It it's like an emergent property. It just somehow happens. And I don't mean that in like a disparaging way. I just people are like, "Oh, I don't use that like Mastodon." I've run into so many people that are like, "I don't use Mastodon because nobody's there." And it's like, "Well, nobody's there because you don't use Mastodon." But then somehow eventually there's a tipping point where like it hits a critical mass and it's like, "Oh, everybody's there." Like it's almost like TikTok. I could be wrong about this, but I've heard the way that TikTok got so popular was because they literally just paid influencers to go sign up and start posting there. And then because, all of a sudden now like Ariana Grande and all these other people, whoever else people care about than the pop culture, like suddenly everybody's like, oh, let's go over there because that's where my favorite celebrities are and it's the cool hip new app. And now all of a sudden, like almost every American has a TikTok account, which is completely insane. I think it is literally like half of Americans have TikTok now, which is utterly insane. But it's such a weird, like the network effect is just such a weird thing. And I don't understand the psychology of like how something takes off like that. I think I have a book actually that maybe I should go reread that talks about this, but it's just so weird to me. I don't understand it. It's yeah, yeah, I don't know. um Real quick, I see you saw this here, but going back to the police story from Pennsylvania, Jonah weighed in on the live chat. He said the headline is accurate. The police had a warrant, but the defendant tried to argue that the warrant was too broad, which is what I was talking about, and the court ruled that the warrant was fine because the warrant isn't actually needed in the first place. And that goes back to the whole expectation of privacy thing, which is what I was getting confused on
Mm.
towards the end when I was like, I'm going to dig into this more. So, yikes! That's all I got on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So the
turns
problem
out
is
cops
actually,
didn't even need a warrant.
yeah, vindication to the max. I'm telling you. So it's like, ooh. So like, imagine like, I feel like we're operating under presumption that the warrant is needed no matter what. It's like, yes, you need a warrant to ask Google for anything, but I think because we're operating under an assumption that we just completely ignore the fact that it's really literally just reverse that requirement. So I think it's probably something that we need to communicate, like like more stringently. It's like this it's not required anymore. You know?
In a lot of cases, yeah. And I mean, like you said it several times when we first talked about the story is,
Yeah.
it's also is a warrant isn't needed if the company willingly hands it over. Like if the cops come to my door, let's say hypothetically, I don't know, one of my Mastodon users was like plotting something in the DMs. The cops are totally okay to just come knock on my door and be like, "Hey, we know you're the admin behind this. Will you hand over this user's data?" And I can tell them to come back with a warrant, which I probably would. But it's like if Google says no, that's fine. Like, which actually Proton's done that before. Proton has lawyers that the cops will come up to them. And I know I'm just making all the Proton haters so mad right now, but the cops will come up to them and say, like, we think that this person is violating the law. We want their data. Here's all the evidence we have. And Proton has gone and talked to their lawyers and shown them the evidence and been like, should we ask for a warrant? And the lawyers are like, I think we should just comply here. And I'm sure there's a lot of math that goes into that, and it's a very complicated decision. But like companies do that. So, um, Andy Greenberg has an amazing book called Tracers in the Dark that's all about cryptocurrency and how Bitcoin is not actually anonymous. And in the fourth part, he talks about dark websites that host CSAM. And he says it's so funny how so many of these and for the record I'm quoting him, I'm not trying to be political here, but he's like it's so funny how so many of these like hardcore libertarian free speech absolutist organizations, all these like crypto companies and these hosting providers, the minute you tell them we think this site is hosting CSAM and here's our evidence, they will comply immediately. And he points out it's probably a moral thing. Like even they have an ethical line where they're like, no, this is too much. We're not going to defend this guy. Here's everything we know. Have at it. But it's case in point. Like if you make that argument, and again, maybe they don't even have to. Maybe I just the cops come knock on my door and I'm like, yeah, sure, here, whatever. I'm eating breakfast. Leave me alone. Which again, I wouldn't do that. But it's the cops. If they comply, they don't need a warrant. It's only if they refuse to comply that the cops need to go get a warrant. So yeah. Um,
Yeah, we got a few
General.
more comments from Jonah as well, actually. It's also worth noting that the court said that if you actively protect your internet connection, then a warrant might actually be required. And they specifically listed using a VPN as an example of something that might have changed this case. Like, wow, like I think like we should definitely have like read more into this for sure. Because like I was
Yeah,
operating
no
under the
kidding.
assumption that, oh Lord, just use DuckDuckGo instead of Google. But the problem is
Yeah,
actually
same.
way more systemic. It's like, oh Lord, like maybe like you should have a phone booth door, as like Jonah mentioned just now. Like in the first place,
Yeah,
your VPN is a phone booth door. So yeah, honestly, like excellent, like feedback. Like of course, like I think like Jonah does a really amazing job of like offering a really good analysis here. Um, of course, like he can't always be on the podcast. But honestly, I feel
yeah,
like it would joy to have him on more. Of course. Uh,
yeah.
but
I'm
yeah,
sure he'll
like
be back sometime in the future,
he will.
here and there.
Yeah. Mentioning a comment from No Love Left on this handle saying this has been eye opening. Dang, and thank you. Yeah, it's Scary. But remember, this currently is applied towards Pennsylvania residents. We don't
Mhm.
know if like this will be appealed toward the federal level. Maybe the Supreme Court judges will say something like, okay, this is obviously a challenge on home sniffers in the United States, or it's not. We don't know. But let's just actually make the president more clear, on your right to privacy. And maybe they will cover this in the federal level just to like make that point. Um, so yeah, like as I've said before, keep an eye out in the future. Will this be appealed? We don't know. But if it does get appealed, be on the lookout for potential like more arguments for having a VPN as your phone booth door, metaphorically speaking.
What's funny is I've used that analogy before where, when you try to talk people into being more private and secure, it's like, "Oh, it's inconvenient. I gotta use a password manager. I gotta use Signal. I gotta use a VPN." And it's like, yes, but think about your front door, right? Like, it's really inconvenient to shut your door and lock it. Like, it'd be so much easier if you just left your door open and just walked in and out freely. But we decided that it's a worthwhile trade-off. Like, it takes a few extra seconds, but my home is more secure. And I make that argument with privacy tools is like, yeah, it's inconvenient to have to, log into your VPN and open a separate app for messaging and all this stuff, but it's a trade-off that hopefully I think is worth it for most people to have better security in our digital lives, which are increasingly intertwined with our physical real lives. So, yeah, make sure you guys are shutting and locking the door. All right. On that note, that is all the updates from This Week in Privacy, and they will be shared here on the blog every week. So subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. For people who prefer audio, we have been doing podcast style recordings of these updates every week as well. They're live streamed on the YouTube channel, as you know, you are watching it, and will also be available for watch afterwards, both here on YouTube and on PeerTube. Privacy Guides is an impartial nonprofit organization that is focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on our website, privacyguides.org. To make a donation, click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page. You can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or opt to donate anonymously using Monero or with your favorite cryptocurrency. You can also become a paid member, which unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content and priority during This Week in Privacy live stream Q&A. You'll get a cool badge on your profile in the Privacy Guides forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of helping support independent media. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next week.